Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is happening in Tanzania is truly tragic. Some reports say that 500, others are going as high as 700 people have been killed in that election protest. And no doubt, billions of dollars of property have been destroyed. And all because the powers that be failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. This is a cycle that is so sickening. It's a routine in many African countries. We are stuck. Don't seem to be able to know what to do to have a stable political system. And so we are caught up in these cycles of politically motivated violence, all for the sake of those in power hanging on to power. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. How I've been, trying to figure out how to best explain the situation or to find a starting point, and the best thing I can say is Africa, a beautiful continent, and yet it has failed tremendously. I mean, look around. You're finding presidents that are being re-elected at 92 years old. Their vice presidents, some of them cannot even speak anymore, yet alone walk. Here we thought, we've changed. Maybe it was the men that had the problem. Now the women are killing too, in Tanzania. Power, that hunger, that, no succession plan. It's just, the whole liberation of Africa can be summarized in by just saying everything went wrong. That's how best you can put it. Whatever we fought for, it did not materialize at all.
Yes, that is truly tragic. What we have here is a situation where this has repeated itself so many times that some of the intellectuals, like Professor Lumumba, is even going to the extent of suggesting that many African countries, particularly the youth, are now looking at coups as a solution to our problem. Let's just hear what he had to say on that issue.
Today, you walk across Africa and you hear young people saying, what is the purpose of voting anyway? The result is predetermined. And these individuals, once they get into power, what is their greatest claim to fame? They are thieves, they are liars, they are murderers. So people are becoming helpless. And it is in this context when an enlightened or a group of enlightened individuals in the armed forces then seize power through the barrel of the gun, then they get the people's support, because the people say we don't like these individuals and therefore we are not going to listen to these individuals who say that power has been seized unconstitutionally. We are going to argue that the end justifies the means. And this is why, therefore, coups are becoming something that are celebrated. So
And the locomotive is
today, you walk across Africa and you hear young people saying,
this is most unfortunate, but one cannot deny that he has got a point there. Each time we elect the civilian government, as soon as they get into power, they want to consolidate their hold on power by becoming dictators, by rigging elections, by corrupting all the institutions in the nation to extend their stay in power. And you think, okay, you go to the street protests, you go through all this system, and you finally get rid of them. Another group comes in, they do the same thing. So I think there is some logic in what he's saying, that people are thinking that maybe a military coup is the solution. But of course, in the case of Zimbabwe, that is not the solution, because we did have a military coup in 2017. And all it managed to bring is one faction of ZANU-PF to replace another. Nothing changed. And at the present moment, to be quite honest, in Zimbabwe, the army has become such an part and parcel of the ZANU-PF corruption that it cannot be trusted to do anything else. We've seen this in other countries. Look what is happening in Sudan, where the army had been integrated into the corruption, and they were beginning to enjoy themselves. And when there was an attempt to change, to end the dictatorship, the army took over. Egypt, the same thing. So, in my view, having these coups, military coups, would not be the solution.
No, Wilbert, unfortunately, people are seeing similarities in their different countries. And if one country is said to be liberated through a coup, everybody wants it. Burkina Faso had a military coup and they got the right person. Now everybody wants it. You look at the suppression that is there, the similarities, internet blackouts. This is a ZANU-PF, rule book. That's how they play. And guess what? One of the ZANU-PF members was there and was pictured with the president of Tanzania recently. Look at Mozambique, what happened in Mozambique. It was ZANU-PF again, that was involved. So people are looking at patterns. How then do we get ourselves out of this thing? And right now, the example is Traore, President Traore. He came through a coup, and now everybody will believe that there is a young man within the ranks that can help. You can no longer stop it. What starts as a peaceful demonstration, if not listened to, will escalate into full-blown conflict. That is what it is. We shouldn't try and meander and straight. That is the truth.
Well, that is true, but I think what people should not make the mistake of thinking that what happened in Burkina Faso can be repeated elsewhere. I've just given you the example of Zimbabwe itself. We had a military coup. It didn't change anything. All it did is remove one dictator for another. And recently we had people getting involved, getting passionate about the Geza revolution. And Geza made it abundantly clear that if that had succeeded, he wanted to replace Mnangagwa with Chiwenga. So that would have been a disaster for the country. So my view in the case of Zimbabwe, particularly where you've got those in the army, the police, the CIO, who have been totally corrupted by the regime, it will just be another version or faction of the ZANU-PF fighting another for power. And will not be ending the dictatorship. It will just be replacing one dictator with another. So the issue of looking to the military, as Professor Lumumba is trying to argue there, as a solution, in my view, would not be the answer for Zimbabwe. What we need is to have the democratic reforms implemented so we've got a meaningful, free, fair, and credible elections. There's no mystery in that.
I agree with the point that you're bringing across, and I think it's very valid. In the sense that we really need to look at the bigger picture, but it's going to be different. And like Professor Lumumba there, he warned to say the people and the young people specifically are beginning to think that elections don't work. Democracy is something that is just wishful thinking. What we need is full on, violence. And we are seeing this across, Africa. I mean, we've just in this short period, there's been so many coups. Madagascar, Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe involved as well. It's ongoing. Mozambique, they had another conflict recently. All that comes from elections that are being rigged. And there's a poison pill. That much we must mention, there is a poison pill. And every time when you see a ZANU-PF character involved in these here or towards these countries' elections, disaster follows. And I think, as SADC, they need to address the Zimbabwe problem, because I think that is the poison pill for the entire region.
Well, one of the things that I liked about what happened in Tanzania is that there is a video showing many ordinary people in that country marching together to demand change, including church leaders. I think that is a positive thing for Tanzania. And I think it would have been really good if Zimbabwe got to that point. At the present moment, we are failing to get there, to that point, because ZANU-PF has thrown in this bone, this ED 2030. And unfortunately, some of our opposition leaders have jumped onto it, and they've turned that into the big issue. ED 2030 is a side issue, a distraction. We don't need that. We need to focus on implementing democratic reforms to ensure we have free, fair, and credible elections. We just watched the video of the march in Tanzania. I think one other thing that I liked about that is the fact that it was peaceful. And it's unfortunate that the authorities in Tanzania did not respond to it. Because if they had responded to it, maybe the country would have been spared all the violence that has followed. I'm not sure exactly at what point this march took place, whether it was before the violence or after the violence. But I hope it will mark a turning point in Tanzania's history, where people say we don't want this violent street protests. We'll march together peacefully and demand change. And let's have meaningful change, not token change. Zimbabwe had the opportunity to have that meaningful change during the GNU. I think that point must be made very clear and emphatically clear. We wasted that opportunity. We don't want the violence that we've seen in Mozambique, so many lives lost, so much property destroyed. But at the present moment, there really is no other way out. Because as much as the 2023 elections were flawed and illegal, SADC and the AU condemned them. And yet, we found ourselves in a situation where we are failing to hold those elections. And instead of President Mnangagwa and his regime acknowledging that the elections were flawed, he doesn't seem to care. Because in his State of the Nation address, he did not even mention that the regime is implementing even one token reform to make sure 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible. And if we go into those elections with no reforms, the process will be disputed. Many people will be tempted to go on the street, and we could end up with the same level of violence and destruction that we have seen happen in Tanzania. That to me is a tragedy that we really could have avoided. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
In closing, I would want to say, there are lessons that can be learned from the events that are happening in Tanzania. First of all, you have people that refused to participate in a shambolic election. They called it as it is. And they went out peacefully at first to demand free, fair, and credible elections. And the good thing, like you said, they were accompanied by men of the cloth, different people of society coming together to address a problem. And unfortunately, the leaders did not take heed or did not take them seriously. And now what we are seeing is full-on violence, destruction of property. I hear they've taken over airports. They are going towards their state house. It's chaos, burning people's property and so forth. That is the last step that I would want even a country like Zimbabwe to get to. But if the authorities do not pay heed to their people or do not take their people seriously, this would be the fate of many African countries. We saw it in Mozambique. Right now, they should be trying to recover instead of going forward. Zimbabwe's economy is fragile. One of these would draw us right back, to the ground. The bold thing that they did was to first stop their participating in rigged elections. And there is no outcome here. There is no winner right now. And that's a good position to be in until we find a solution to how can we best meet international standards for elections and both meet the constitution of the land. Then can you proceed into an election? And I say well done to the people of Tanzania for taking that bold stand. And I say to the people of Zimbabwe, here is a lesson that needs to be learned. It can be done. Thank you.
Well, I would like to add to that emphasis. I think that is the point. We can avoid another rigged and disputed elections in 2028. But what we need to focus on is to get the reforms implemented. If there was a political will, it's 3 years before those elections. Meaningful reforms can be implemented in that period. But we know that there is no political will in ZANU-PF. And at the present moment, ZANU-PF feels they have got the control of Parliament and the Senate, and Mnangagwa may even be pushing for this 2030. But what I want to emphasize to the people of Zimbabwe is that 2030 is not the big issue. 2030 is being used as a decoy to draw attention away from the fact that the regime is not implementing even one token reform. I've said this and I'll say it again. Even if ZANU-PF, we manage to stop Mnangagwa implement this 2030, as long as ZANU-PF is able to rig the 2028 elections, then ZANU-PF will form the government. And it will be no different from the current one. In other words, it will be a dictatorship. We will have a dictator, whether it be Chiwenga or Takwirei or somebody else. It will still be a dictatorship. The corruption, mismanagement that we see today will continue. We want a government that is elected by the people, that is accountable to the people. That is the only way you are going to end the corruption, mismanagement, and tyranny in the country. So stopping Mnangagwa getting in or continuing past 2028, yes, will be a prize, but it's not even worth keeping. Because if at the end of the day you get another dictator, what good is it? It's no different from what happened in 2017. Yes, Mugabe must go, and Mugabe did go. But look what we got. Another dictator. Nothing changed. So the focus should be, we must get the reforms implemented, or we must refuse to participate in the flawed process to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. That is important. Because if we participate, we give the regime legitimacy. That people should not misunderstand. I repeat, Zimbabwe cannot afford another rigged election that will end up with the same street protests and destruction of property as we've seen in Tanzania. We have had 45 years of rigged elections. Let's stop this madness. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.